There's one name, I won't say it now because it might become the name of the next album.
Brave enough to go climbing a wall so high that no sunlight is.
Well, Eirik, I'm going to start asking you. Kings of Convenience came back after 12 years with Peace or Love, an album that you and Erlen were working on for about 5 years. Is that correct? I want to ask you, do you remember how it was that both of you decided to return with an album after so long?
I guess it seems like we've been away for a long time, but for us, we have never actually stopped playing together. And we had actually toured every year since, so between Declaration of Independence 2009 and 2016, we had toured for several weeks of every year in the whole period. So when we came to 2016, it didn't feel like we had been away for a long time. It just felt like, okay, it's been 7 years since the last record came out and we have a lot of new songs. So let's go into the studio and start recording them again. Not like a comeback. It never had the feeling or the concept of a comeback album. So the reason why it took so long for us to release or to manage to record the album, there were many different reasons, but the fact that it took 5 years meant that from the release of Declaration of Independence till Peace or Love, there were 12 years, a 12-year gap. And then you're talking about a comeback. That's a comeback when a band releases a new record 12 years after the old record. But for us, it never felt like a comeback because we basically never stopped working together. And Erlen has released solo work, and I have released solo work with Komoda. So that kind of took some attention during some of those years in between, but we never stopped working as Kings of Convenience. So that was an ongoing project the whole time. But it's just that we are very slow and we have very high standards of what we want to release. So we don't want to put out something that we're not absolutely sure about. So it takes a long time.
Now, Peace or Love is an album that is inspired by those life tips that both of you will have liked to hear when you were younger. And why did you decide to give this message on this album? I mean, how did the concept of the album came about?
I like the idea of giving advice through songs, because when I was younger, I had a few artists. They were kind of my mentors in life. They gave songwriters who speak to me specifically through their songs, giving advice to me as a young person, a young music listener. Back then, there was some artists who were not afraid to put advice into their songs, and I've always really appreciated those pieces of advice. I hear it so much. There are not so many songs that include advice, but I would like to see more of that, because I think it's a very valuable thing, because if the advice is irrelevant or wrong, then you won't listen to it. But if it's relevant and true advice, then some individuals will pick up this piece of advice and it will have value in their life. It's also an age thing. We are now older and we tend to feel that we have a little bit of experience and feel more capable of giving advice.
Speaking of the name of the album, I knew that Peace or Love name was idea of the guitarist from Komodo.
Exactly.
The other musical project you have, and I wanted to know if you and Erlen already had other options to name this album, and if you remember what they were.
There's one name, I won't say it now because it might become the name of the next album. The answer is yes, there was another candidate. But if I say it now, then I've already given away.
No spoiler, no spoilers,
Yeah.
please.
Through the alleyways to cool off in the shadows, then into the street, following the water.
Now, I know also there's one song called Angel was recorded in Chile, and you have mentioned that several songs on this new album have South American influence. Were there other countries in Latin America or the world that you took as inspirations for other songs on the album?
No, I think there's definitely the core idea of how we play music is clearly very inspired by samba and bossa nova music. So I would say Brazil is the musical garden where we have plucked the most fruits of inspiration. But it's funny how we, as two very pale Norwegians, have this strong love for Latin rhythms and for a certain type of harmonies and melodies that somehow are inspired by South America. I don't know how it happened, but it's kind of counterintuitive, because if you look at the world, if you look at outside my window now, there's a blizzard. Can you see?
Yeah.
Can you see? There's a snow and a snowstorm today. So there's nothing in my life that would remind you of the Latin vibe that we have in our songs. It's more kind of like a, I don't know, like a counter effect. Like we grew up in a very cold and very hostile place, and the Latin rhythm and the Latin sound was appealing to us as an idea of something else, something very attractive.
I always wanted more, the endless wave of our lives.
This album has the participation of several friends from Kicks of Convenience, such as Faith and Después. Why do you decide to have the company of all friends and not seek the participation of other artists?
The choice to have the staves was a very random meeting that was set up by our this hotel in Berlin called the Michelberger Hotel, who have noticed that artists and musicians tend to prefer to stay at the Michelberger Hotel when they come to Berlin. And after a few years, Tom and Nadine Michelberger, who runs the hotel, realized that none of these artists never meet each other. They all come to stay at our hotel, but none of them ever get to meet each other. So they had the idea of speaking to Justin Vernon of Bon Iver and Bryce and Aaron Dessner of The National to co-host a festival where for 1 week they will invite all the artists who usually come during the year to come and stay at the hotel at the same time, so that they get the chance to hang out together and collaborate and maybe form new musical projects together. So all the artists got invited to stay for 5 days, and then at the last 2 days of the week they hosted a festival where we would be able to perform whatever projects we would come up with in front of an audience. So they sold tickets for the last 2 days of the week, and that's where we met the Staves. So the Staves were invited there, and we were there, and we were jamming together, and I was playing the riff of Catholic Country, and they were starting to sing. So we had a performance together with the Staves. This was in 2016, and then in 2018 we were back at the Michelberger Festival, and that time Leslie Feist was there. So she joined in and sang the song that we had written with the Staves. Yeah, so it's just these random events, it's random life events. Your paths cross with someone, and it's feels like a destiny meeting whenever something good comes out of these random events.
This For Kings of Convenience album has been widely compared to the much loved Quiet is the New Loud, which turned in 20 last year. Do you guys deal with any kind of pressure when making new music? I mean, considering that albums like that having earned a very special place in the heart of the fans.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. I think that you just summed up the big monster in our lives. Pressure, the feeling that when you do something new, it has to be better than what you did before. And that can sometimes be very frightening because you never know if what you're doing is better than what you were doing before. There's always a risk that what you're doing is a step down in quality. And as an artist, that's your biggest fear, you know, that what you're doing is not as valuable as what you used to be doing. It's something you have to work, something you have to really pay attention to. So when I work, I try to take this pressure off my shoulders by saying that it's okay to try something and it's okay to fail. It's okay to not be totally sure about what I'm doing. And what I'm hoping to do is to develop as an artist, to create something that's more valuable than what I was making in the past. But I will never be 100% sure about the quality of the new material I'm working on. I guess the test is when you start playing them in concerts. When the new songs are there in a concert, you can start to sense the vibe. And what I've experienced now in the last 2 months of touring Peace or Love in Europe, it seems like the new songs they've already become special to people, and I'm pretty sure that they will, like, after a few years, they will grow as important to people as our old songs, the Peace or Love songs and the Right on Empty Street songs and the Declaration of Dependence songs.
Eirik, with the release of this album, you started a small tour of Norway that took place in the middle of the pandemic and social distancing. What do you think has been the good and the bad that COVID-19 left in the return of the Kings of Convenience to the stage?
Well, it meant that we got 1 year of no shows, just working on the very, very fine details of the sound quality of the record. So we kind of got one after we had finished. We finished the last recording of the album just before the pandemic hit in February 2020, and then nothing happened in the music world for 1 year, which was a great opportunity for us to just sit at home in our 2 different studios and listen to the details of the album. So we kind of got 1 year. It was kind of like a dream to have 1 year of time where nothing is going to happen anyway. There's not going to be any shows, no releases. There's no point in releasing a record in the middle of lockdown. So just take your time for 1 year in the studio, listen to the details. And for us, that's kind of a dream. You know, we love to work that way. We love to really, really, really go deep into details. That was the upside. And of course, the downside has been the uncertainty of the live. We've had to cancel the shows we had planned, and we had to make these strange tours where in Norway you play to 50 people, 50 or 100 people in a big concert hall where there could be 1,500 people. There's only a few seats with people there. It was a very weird vibe, you know. It was not hard to explain, but it felt very strange. So there's been a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unpredictable events.
Interpretation, the music's too loud and the noise from the crowd increases the chance of misinterpretation. So let your hips do the talking.
Over the years, you and Erling have learned to create a dynamic of working only a few months. and not to breaking up as happens with equally successful bands. In your case, how do you manage to balance your musical and personal life when it's time to go back to work in Kings of Convenience?
Well, I think me and Erlen, we look kind of differently at it. I think I work with Kings of Convenience every day, the whole year. I'm working on writing new songs, writing new lyrics, playing old songs, practicing old songs. So for me, Kings of Convenience is my stable, everyday work. For a few hours every day, I dedicate myself to Kings of Convenience. For Erlen, his life is more project-based. He will have a few months dedicated to one project, and then he will move on to another project and dedicate himself to that. So I actually don't think Kings of Convenience would have survived as long as it did had I done the same as Erlen. If I was as project-minded as he is, then our paths will just go two different directions at one point. I think it's been my dedication to Kings of Convenience, which meant that whenever Erlen decided to come back to Kings of Convenience, there was a Kings of Convenience to come back to. It also explains our different musical careers, that Erlen has been involved in many different things, and that tends to fit him better. Like he's very restless. He's very keen on doing new things all the time, where I'm more stable and steady and more happy to focus on one thing for a very long time.
Well, Eirik, thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.